On Friday, Kanye West went on an absolutely egregious anti-Semitic tirade on X, saying to his over 32 million followers things like Hitler was so fresh and any Jewish person that does business with me needs to know that I don't like or trust any Jewish person. Well, to unpack this rant, I'm joined by CBN's own Billy Hallowell. Billy, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, my initial thoughts were this is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because you have, first of all, on its head, it's anti-Semitic. It's horrible. It's pointing back to things that we know without any dispute are horrific things. And on the other side, you have this person who just a couple of years ago was traveling the country and the world preaching the gospel, or so we thought at the time, traveling with musicians, working with Christian artists, and you thought, man, this guy's had this transformation. And then here we are. So there's that. And there's just so many other thoughts about where he is spiritually and, emotionally, purportedly to be able to put this sort of thing out there to so many people, 32 million people, as you mentioned.
I mean, it just keeps going on and on. It's egregious. It's terrible. And Billy, it goes on. He said, "Call me Adolf Hitler. I'm going to normalize talking about Hitler. The way they talking about killing N-words has been normalized." And I think this is just a larger stream of this like weird Christian anti-Semitism that's not new, but coming up more in the surface. I've seen a lot of people, even in their profile pictures, having crosses and then just saying egregious anti-Semitic things where I'm like, guys, the person who was on that cross is Jewish. Basically, every book in the Bible, including the New Testament, outside of maybe Luke and Acts, was written by a Jewish person. So obviously, I take it personally. You know this, Billy. I've been to Israel 30 times. I've spent a lot of my life combating anti-Semitism. Do you see this as just a one-off, or do you see this like okaying this, it's not that big of a deal to anti-Semitism?
There's so much danger to it because when you have 32 million people following you, and that's just on one platform, this is a person who has a ton of influence. And let's be honest, a couple of years ago, because of the pivot he made into faith, it gave him a lot more influence with people he didn't have that sort of sway with before. So there's a lot going on here. You have a very powerful person saying very damaging things, but I think there's this bigger backdrop. I agree with everything you just said, where we're watching anti-Semitism rise around the globe. And this actually brings me back to really the danger of bias, right? Because a lot of, I think, what is happening right now with the anti-Israel bias, anti-Jewish bias, is that because of the conflict in the Middle East, the way the media has covered it, the way that Israel is held to a standard that nobody else in the history world has ever been held to, there's a lot of misconception, and it creates this frustration and anger at Israel in these different quarters that I think actually turns itself back into this anti-Semitism and helps fuel it. Not that you can't ask questions, that's fine, but I think there's a line that is crossed. Obviously, what we're talking about here, that line is really being crossed. And I want to mention this because there were two other messages that stuck out to me here. One was, he said, one thing about being God on earth is you have to constantly forgive every human. And I thought, what in the world is he talking about? In a message before that, he said, I will say nothing bad or against China. They always showed up. And he went on this whole thing about how much he loved China. So there were other issues going on in this tirade that were equally disturbing.
So I think it's easy. I think a lot of people, including myself, will be like, all right, Kanye's lost his mind. He can just go on these crazy rants and let's ignore it. But, I was part of a documentary. I had an Auschwitz survivor friend we made a documentary about. His name was Irving Roth, and his whole spiel was, listen, guys, it didn't start with gas chambers and crematorium. It started with words. It started with okaying anti-Semitism. I was actually just WhatsApping with some friends of mine, some Jewish friends of mine in Australia, and they're terrified. We did a whole story about this, how anti-Semitism is absolutely exploding in Australia. You talk about Columbia, not the country, but the University of New York, anti-Semitism is exploding. And I think what we have to understand is it starts with words, then it moves to boycotts, then it moves to violence, and in different places around the country and around the world, you're starting to see that. And for me, I was always trying to figure out, what is this? What is happening? And as we've talked about, as a student of this isn't new. This isn't something that just popped up. This is a arguably one of the oldest demonic spirits in the world, the hatred of the Jewish people, the hatred of the promises of God. And you know, Billy, I'm going to make a long story short. I was going down these rabbit holes of why anti-Semitism, and so I'm gonna abridge 10 years of study into one sentence, basically. I finally heard this Jewish rabbi in Jerusalem point something out to me, and it connected all the dots for me. All right, ready? So I'm like, okay. People are like, oh, the Jews killed Christ, which is like such a ridiculous comment, and you know all these things. They control the media. It's always a facade. Anti-Zionism. And then he said, listen, what is the theme? And he quoted this one line from a Hitler Youth song. And suddenly it connected all the dots to me. So this is a quote from a Hitler Youth song. It says, "We are the joyous Hitler Youth. We do not need any Christian value. Our leader is our savior. The Pope and the rabbi shall be gone." And here it is. "We want to be pagans once again." And suddenly I realized anti-Semitism isn't just hatred of one nationality, it's hatred of God himself. It's hatred of
Absolutely.
everything that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob stands for. It's a hatred of the Judeo-Christian worldview. It's a rebellion against the God of the universe. And when you get that, you understand how easy it is to be manipulated into this garbage that Kanye's spewing out. And sorry if this is a little editorial and if I'm a little passionate, because I want you to know, if you're Jewish or if you're Israeli, we're with you. This is egregious. This is unacceptable. And you have some Gentile friends who will not put up with this. But Billy, what should people take away from this? What should people do? How should people be reacting to Kanye's rant?
I love that question, and I love what you were just saying before. And before I answer specifically, I do want to say, go back, you look through the Bible. I mean, this goes back to the beginning of time, right? It's always about going after the Jewish people. You look at Esther and Haman, right? You look at that story. I mean, this is a repeated. Why is it repeated? And I would say to those who are skeptical or don't believe, if you're watching or listening, look at these stories and ask yourself, why always the Jews? Why? What connection there does God have to his plans, right? Not just his end times plans, but his plans with Jesus and saving the world and all that. So there's so much there, but this is the story that is as old as time. As far as how we should respond, I think a lot of people are going to want to lash out at Kanye, yell at Kanye. We obviously need to speak out against what he's saying and say this is not true. I think we need to be praying for him. I mean, this is somebody who appeared to be in the Christian fold, appeared to be really coming together with Christians at one point, and right now appears to be very, very far off from where he should be, saying things that are absolutely deplorable. We need to pray for him, pray for a clean heart and open eyes, a clear mind, all of those things. And also praying for all the Jewish people out there, all the Christians being persecuted. This issue is horrific. And it's going to be an issue that I think we have to continue to combat in the months and years ahead.
Billy, thank you again. As always, your insight is spot on. So hopefully we don't have to report on any more of this Kanye stuff. But unfortunately, I do think that there is I'm going to call a spade, a spirit of anti-Semitism that has been unleashed again in this world, and it's our job to say never again and make it mean something. So, Billy Hallowell, CBN's own Billy Hallowell, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Thank you.